Num num. Birdie num num.
Don't do that, Jesus Christ! You're gonna get me killed! Out of here!
Oh, Billy. Ah!
I'm just messing with you.
And we are live, and I am just messing with you. With that introduction, for those of you on YouTube, I got Birdie Num Num, Peter Sellers out of the way in the party. Did you know that Peter Sellers was a big Freemason? He was. A lot will stick as we go on. And from the cable guy, Jim Carrey, showing us that we live in a world with men have nipples. They can show them anywhere. I get in trouble from YouTube, and I took that clip from YouTube, easily found. But welcome everybody. Very excited tonight. This is our annual Halloween special. Our sacred goring of what? Holy cows? God, I don't know. A Gnostic goring of holy cows, sacred calves. Which one is it?
Yeah.
Scott.
A Gnostic goring of sacred cows, part 2.
Part 2. There you go. Excellent. Always fun to see what we can rile up on this season of the witch as the ghosts are out. So glad to see the room is already filling up well, and we will get to you. As always, if you have any questions for our guest tonight or our host and co-host, please write them in all caps. Put a lot of question marks, or you can use the super chats to get to the top of the line. And it's a lot of varied questions. If you have any questions in general about Gnosticism, I'm sure we can handle them. Other than that, as always, the audio version will come out probably tomorrow. It will be on YouTube. And I truly appreciate you being here and the support you give this venture. And I hope you continue to support as putting out a lot of exciting content this year, the rest of the year, the holiday season, some surprises, as you will soon find out, and some excellent guests that will take us to the House of Gnosis. So with us tonight, we are very happy to be joined once again by Scott Smith and Sandra Wells. How are you guys doing?
Great. Fantastic.
All ready to create heresy among the heretics.
Awesome. Yes, and if you guys could please speak up. You guys sound a little squeaky out there.
Okay.
And with us too, after a long pause, we are glad to have Mr. Christian Smith. Chris, how are you and how have you been?
Can't hear you, Chris.
Can't hear you, Chris.
Yeah, I think you put yourself on mute, dude.
Yeah, good, Miguel. Thanks for welcoming me back. Just looking forward to having a chilling evening, chilling with my fellow True Seekers.
And how have you been? How has these strange times treated you?
To be perfectly honest, no, not well. It's been very strange, and yeah, there's a whole story there that you don't want to hear. Not now, anyway.
Well,
yeah.
All right.
I'm glad things are a little more normal than they were a year ago, but man, is this thing ever going to end? Sheesh.
No.
But he has gotten much more involved with Heller and Ecclesia Gnostica, so that's the good news.
Well, as long as he's not broadcasting from jail or Guantanamo Bay, I think.
Not yet.
Everything's fine. Not yet, but
we've got the bail money in cash if we need to.
Yeah, in crypto these days. Who knows?
Oh, good point.
And with us too, as always, we've got the Moondog Vance. Vance, what's happening?
Oh, waiting for a good Halloween show. We got plenty of scary material from the past year. Most of it looks like a ball with spiky things coming out of it, maybe. It's going to take the place of the jack-o'-lantern, I guess, you know. But let's gore some of those while we're at it. I'm ready to go.
Awesome.
Ready for your questions.
Awesome. Great. As far as housekeeping, nothing important right now that I can think of. For those of you out there, next week we will also have, we will continue the Halloween vibe, the season of the witch vibe, the time where the liminal spaces are getting full of those spirits that are crossing over to our world in these darkening times. And we will have Anthony Tyler join us to discuss his new book, Hunt Manual. And we had a great discussion about the nature of evil, the supernatural, and shadow work, how to express your shadow and how to do that work to integrate your shadow. Because Yaldi Baldi knows we need more of that shadow work today, because nobody's integrating their shadow. Everybody's projecting, and it seems everybody's just getting even more fragmented regardless of the situation. And important, because I hate to break it to you, but there is no going back to the old normal. I hope you understand this by now, and I hope you can simply embrace the unknown, the chaos, and remember that we do have a choice in creating the world we want out there. We have a choice in creating a reality we want, and it can be better than what is outside, regardless of what the archons throw at us. We are a million times more creative. We are stronger than the archons and the demiurge and anything in this black iron prison. And yes, people are in the chat. Somebody said chaos is a ladder. It is. Indeed, it is, Dusan. And great to see everybody there. And on Almost, I see there's another guy named Van Sachi in the YouTube channel. Watch out for him, Vance. He could be a CIA plant. Who else is out there?
Is a deep state.
Yeah, deep state. Yeah, exactly. Other than that, hello, Lady Tanya, and I hope you're doing okay. Troy F, not Troy Elf. Well, maybe watch the movie Elf in a few weeks. It'll be okay. But anyway, let's get us to goring some of them sacred cows, shall we? What shall we start with? I think, what do we discuss? I know last year we took some, I don't want to say shots. We always have some good, intelligent discussions. Last year we talked about A Course in Miracles, the Kabbalah, Buddhism, and some other topics. And it was more of a deconstruction than a real goring, although a few shots here and there, but definitely an intelligent conversation. And as we were talking, Scott, it seems Scientology, I contend it's a Gnostic religion. I know that might offend people, but I've made the case in writing and in other shows. Weaponized Gnosticism works really well when you want control, but Scientology seems to be dying. It's a thing of the past. It's one of those things where the internet was actually a good thing for a change and was very useful at taking down Scientology, along with the group Anonymous that really raised hell and gave him so much shit. But Scott, in LA, Scientology, powerful, what's going on?
Yeah, well, all of us here have had our encounters.
Speak up, please.
Yeah, all of us have had our encounters with Scientology here in LA, one of the major centers. I started when I had a girlfriend in the mid-70s who was a Scientologist, and I took the communication course. I read Dianetics. I read a couple of Hubbard's other books. And I found them really interesting because he taught people how to use words in communication that normally people just use words very, very loosely. And I was a young editor at Vegetarian World at the time, which became Vegetarian Times. And I found it really challenging. So I took it seriously. I knew a lot of Scientologists. They seemed to find it valuable. However, the Scientology of the mid-70s is not what it metastasized into later. I think, surprisingly enough, because of the way Wikipedia mediates different points of view on controversial topics, you can learn a lot that's fairly accurate on Wikipedia. There's about 4 or 5 different entries for Scientology beliefs, Ron Hubbard, some of the other topics. You can learn a lot about it, and I found it surprisingly balanced, including the academics who think that it does have some value. Now, my own experience in taking the communication course, which is an introductory thing, is that it was a little bit, auditing and some of the other things are a little bit like a light kind of therapy. And anybody who says that he just made it up to earn money doesn't really know much about Scientology. First of all, Hubbard went through a near-death experience after a dental procedure, and he eventually got involved with some major characters like Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons in sex magic and magical rites and stuff like that. He was a pretty serious student of the paranormal, but shenanigans and suspect individuals are often involved with these esoteric movements. The founder of the Golden Dawn, for example, Mathers, and of course Aleister Crowley was involved. So the fact that he was, accused of many different problems and conspiracies, and the fact that Scientology warped into an authoritarian cult, if you want, doesn't mean that he just made everything up. That idea came from Harlan Ellison, the science fiction writer, and I knew him and debated him in public, and I consider him really ignoramus and arrogant in equal parts, a real hard-nosed skeptic. But what he actually said was that another science fiction writer suggested to Hubbard that he should turn his ideas into a religion if he wanted to make money, because they were talking about the struggle of being writers. The essence of their theology, and this is how you can compare it with Gnosticism, is that they believe that the Thetans, or the souls, are immortal. They created the universe for their pleasure, and then somehow became identified with the humans, and they started forgetting what they had done. Now, the paradox here is that when you read deeper into it, it says, well, there's no real objective reality. It's just that the Thetans have agreed on this reality, and that's why it exists, which it sounds a little bit like Advaita Vedanta. But Scientology officially says that the Thetans, which all of us are, this is essentially the soul, can recover their memories. The whole idea of Scientology at the upper levels is that you reincarnate enough times that you go through these Scientology levels that you eventually regain your power and you free yourself from reincarnation. Now, I'm not going to get onto my rant about reincarnation, but Scientology itself doesn't have a specific concept of God. It's vague, kind of the absolute. Where the Gnostic angle comes in, other than this idea that there is a kind of an absolute greater God out there somewhere who's not very involved in this reality, is this figure, this extraterrestrial called Xenu, who 75 million years ago supposedly stole our souls and put us near volcanoes on Earth, and this is how we started incarnating on Earth. And the idea is that, we're supposed to free ourselves of that. We didn't die from the volcanic explosions. So he's a little bit of a demiurge figure, but to a certain extent, all the Thetans are like mini demiurges in that they keep reincarnating, even though it's not doing them much good. So as you said, Scientology has become kind of a very weak thing. The bigger threat is mainstream Christianity. That's the real cult today that is dangerous. Scientology is a minor thing. And of course, there are a lot of split-offs from the main church now. And even the Kaminsky Method discussed this in its last season. So, there's some good and bad points, but I'll let Chris and Sandra talk about their experiences.
Yeah, well, I think it's time for a Halloween story here. So Bishop Heller had some experiences with the Church of Scientology, and so I'll tell you about that before I tell you about my experiences. So back in the late 70s, his first memory of Scientology in his involvement with it was stepping out of his car at one of the parks here and stepping into a pool of blood. And next morning, he read in the papers that there was a murder right there, and there were 2 Scientologists under investigation for it. He then, right off the bat, he did not have warm feelings about this church. And then he did a talk, as he's wont to do, on various figures of religion, and so Hubbard was included in this talk, and a couple of Scientologist agents show up and start like going through his notes, and they want to know what he's talking about, and they're interrogating him. And so he tells them to basically sit down, shut up, if they want to stay. Otherwise, he's going to call the police. Well, they make a big fuss, and they stayed throughout the talk, but they were just acting real bizarre and distracting the audience. And so after this, now for years, he seemed to be stalked by the church because he had given a talk on their perfect leader, Hubbard, that didn't paint him in such a perfect light, dug up a little bit of questionable material, and they wanted to get a hold of that to quote unquote publish it. So he would get approached in grocery stores by seemingly random people, like asking him about his talk, and really interested in that. Like years after he gave it, people come knocking at his door from the Church of Scientology, pretending that they weren't from the Church of Scientology, just like, wait a minute, that insignia on your lapel, that's the Sea Org insignia, isn't it? You're not Scientologist, huh? Okay. Yeah. So this went on for many years through the 80s, and the church just was relentless, and they finally left him alone. It has a sordid history, but I don't think we should judge it based on its sordid history. Every religion has a sordid history. Most big churches have dirty secrets, so don't write it off for that reason. But as far as it being a Gnostic religion, that's interesting. When I first went, so I went to the Church of Scientology not long ago, and it was just out of curiosity, because I'm a curious kind of guy. I just wanted to experience, what is this Dianetics therapy really like? What is this whole thing? And I told them, look, I'm not interested in becoming a Scientologist. I'm just curious. And I said, look, I'm involved with this other church, this Gnostic church. And like, oh, Gnosticism. Yeah, we're Gnostics. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Well, I read their book. They read Dianetics. I haven't read the other Scientology material, but that's their basic book. I wouldn't call it Gnostic. They said they made the claim to being Gnostics based on just the name Scientology. Scientia, it in Latin means knowledge. Okay, pretty weak connection. So I'm sure you've got some good research that you've done on that, Miguel. But they didn't make a very good case for being Gnostics, and certainly the material that I read in Dianetics didn't seem very Gnostic. It was just sort of a pseudoscience. They borrow all of this terminology from science and dress it up dress up their therapeutic language with these scientific terms, and then claim to have all of this empirical evidence that they don't have. And from this empirical evidence, so just let me back up a step here. So in the Dianetics therapy, the point of it is to search out those body memories wherein trauma from earlier in life is stored, so you can release it and get on with your life. It's great in that regards, and like Hubbard was way ahead of his time, figuring out that the unconscious is actually in the cellular memory of the body. So, I mean, he was a genius in that regard. So he was a liar, but he was a genius. And anyway, so eventually they started coming up with memories of past life experiences. So the trauma went beyond this current physical body into past lives. And so from that, they derived the idea of the soul, basically, the Thetan. So, they pretend like this is a, scientifically formulated or based religion, and the empirical evidence is just, these memories come up in therapy. And we all know, of course, how reliable the theory of reincarnation is. So this church just has a rock solid foundation. I would say, so I went through the Dianetics therapy, and it wasn't a bad experience at all. I would say it is maybe tedious. It's just hours and hours and hours of like repeating traumatic stuff, until it kind of diffuses and it doesn't seem as traumatic. And then the auditors looking for clues to trace back to an earlier memory, and then they want to trace back to another earlier memory until you finally get to the trauma. So I did some of it. We didn't really uncover anything spectacular, and I would say, given the amount of time that they spend, they don't charge a ridiculous fee, but it takes a long time and a lot of patience to go through all that therapy. And then at the higher levels, it gets more expensive. So you could fork out tens of thousands of dollars to get any kind of reasonable results out of it. So that's my experience. What's that, Vince?
Boiling the Satan.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and Christian, are you in Cali or?
Yeah, I'm right here in Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
Their headquarters. Well, it's not their headquarters, but I mean they've got a lot of institutions right here. Just around the corner from me.
Right. All right, Belly and the Beast. What about you, Sandra? What have you had any experiences with Scientology? And please speak up.
I read the early Dianetics book when I was 15. Thought he had some interesting things to say, but every Scientologist I ever met in my whole life was a financial slave. They were so much in debt. All they got for their efforts was free classes. Free classes, poor as church mice, never made a penny, just worked for the church for nothing. I have such total disrespect for it. I think it's complete farce. It's my feeling. Everybody I met was miserable and happy and poor.
Maybe you should tell us how you really feel. I think you're dancing. She might need one of those courses. They're Christian, an 8-hour course to get the truth out of her. But,
yeah.
Gonna have to do a little ritual magic to protect herself and to avoid the Heller experience.
Yeah, I don't think they have that power. I mean, I don't see them as obviously anybody who can control Hollywood will have power, so that would be their only last thing they could do. What about you, Vince? Any comments or ideas on Scientology?
I had my own experience in the 20s. I went to the communications course. I left early. Like Scott said, there are some good concepts in it. Like anything there's good concepts and things. But I went to a meeting, an org meeting one night, and I think it might have been Miscavige that was at that meeting at the time. Because this is in 1975 or something like that. And so he wasn't such a big deal then. Anyway, they are so paranoid. They were all talking about the IRS and everybody's after us and blah, 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 blah. And I'm the bells are going off in my head. I said, wait a minute. Plus that, when they induct you before you take the courses, nobody mentioned the E-meter. The E-meter, which is ostensibly a galvanic skin response meter. And there's something to it. You do, get a response out of an E-meter when you hold the cans and, somebody talks to you and something alerts you, the back of your mind goes off and the needle goes up. Well, they said, do you know anybody that doesn't like Scientology? Da, 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 da. And they're grilling you Do you guys remember that? Scott, Chris? Maybe Chris, I think. Scott remembers it. So anyway, they give you the third degree. Basically, you're like taking a lie detector test with this e-meter. And so that the whole thing. And then I went with my my ex-wife, and they tried to pry us apart. And this one guy was after her, And so after we quit, they bugged us and bugged us and bugged us and tried to get us to come back. So, it was kind of a scary thing. So that's my experience directly with it. And, I've done a lot of reading and so forth. Actually knew a very good friend and spiritual teacher of mine claims to be, she was high up in there and was his physical therapist. Used to give him massage therapy and so forth. Elron, I mean. So, and she had some stories to tell about Sea Org and so forth. But I believe that they are out after money. They're after power for the organization. They're using people. They will work people. They'll get them to mortgage their houses, empty their bank accounts. And, I don't know the structure of it, but, from what Chris is saying, maybe it starts, because I never paid for any auditing, but it starts, reasonably, and then before you know it. And also what they do is they get them to work as the auditors. Like if you do courses and so forth, you can pay for the courses by spending time at the Scientology church and doing auditing and so forth. So they're using all the people down at the lower levels to, make money for themselves. And although there's nothing wrong with, making money per se, I don't think they promise you powers at the OT level, the OT courses. They used to have like OT1, OT2, OT3, OT4. They kept adding OT levels over the years to keep on getting, and those are very, very expensive, like thousands of dollars. So, that's my take on it. Not, if you're a follower and you don't care about your money, if you just want to spend it, go ahead. You better smoke too. Chain smoking is absolutely essential if you're a high-level Scientologist. You have to be like Elron was. He was a chain smoker. So,
yeah, it was also Navy intelligence. So there's a lot of fun things you can pull apart from L. Ron Hubbard, the occultism.
Yeah, it's questionable as to what he really was. I think he was dishonorable discharge from the Navy, to tell you the truth. But
but I don't know if the intelligence ever lets you go, as they say, like the CIA letting you go. Not going to happen. But anyway, interesting religion, and I'm glad it's evanescing. So, but there was a time when there was Scientology was anything you said about them was a conspiracy, as Dr. Heller, as you guys experienced firsthand. So, as they say, conspiracy theory is just history plus time. So that brings us to conspiracies, and it's a lot there. What do you think, Scott, when these days where conspiracy is everywhere? It's part of it's a coping skill. It's part of everything these days, it seems.
Well, without using the C or the V word that might get us into some trouble here, Sandra and I did an Aeon Bite a couple of Halloweens ago on the cult of the skeptics of the paranormal, where we talked about the fact that there is a conspiracy of the intelligentsia. I mean, the gatekeepers of scientific knowledge, the higher you go, the more atheistic, the more uninterested they are in exploring anything that is cutting edge. As we've talked about before, Thomas Kuhn in The Structure of Scientific Revolution said that, the gatekeepers, the ones who are in charge of the medical societies and all these other things, are about 40 years behind the pioneering evidence. So because they are so far behind, it's easy for dissenters like us to point out in any number of fields where they simply are not giving information that is factual. And that leads to an erosion of respect for people who actually know something. And then this, of course, has been fueled by the internet. So, I mean, when I have people from the left and the right tell me that the Pentagon towers were brought down, or rather the World Trade Center towers were brought down not by the Saudi terrorists. This was part of a Pentagon conspiracy to enrich the defense contractors, and that the moon landing was done in a Hollywood studio, and all these other things. It is. I have very good friends who are intelligent and otherwise informed of stuff who repeat these things to me all the time, and there isn't any foundation for it. It's really surprising. My opinion is Americans are becoming dumber and more ignorant by the year, and this goes along with not reading anymore. I mean, the attention span of the average person seems to be about 280 characters. And this is
Scott, do you officially buy the story of 9/11? Whatever they're giving us?
Sandra and I spent time in Saudi Arabia, and we've spent a lot of time in Muslim countries, and I think we have a lot of insight into Islamic terrorism. And what I found is you can't go down the rabbit hole with QAnon or the people who believe that the Illuminati are really at the Pentagon, or the billionaires control the world and all that kind of stuff. Because and I was in politics for a very long time, if you try to have an argument with these people, it's endless. I mean, for example, one of my best friends says that Obama was born in Africa, and he will give me 20 reasons why. And I learned...
Wait, Scott, we're kind of getting ahead. No, the question is, do you buy the official narrative of 9/11?
Well, essentially, yes, because I know a lot about Islamic terrorism, and they obviously crashed into the towers, and I don't think it was a money-making scheme where they were set up, that it was a Pentagon conspiracy. So it's a waste of my breath. If somebody wants to believe that, and I have really smart and informed friends who will insist on that, it's not something that I would talk about. But in terms of conspiracies in general, I think people are drawn to them because they provide simple explanation for why life is screwed up. And it's a secular version of the Illuminati from the last couple of centuries.
Yeah, I don't buy the official narrative. Vance, you don't either, right?
No, one of the things I was always
thinking
about
terrorism, just engineering shows you.
Yeah. Why didn't they scramble some planes? They had so long to do it, right? These planes are off course, they're hijacked, right? And, why didn't they scramble planes, especially as they approached New York? The Pentagon thing was absolutely ridiculous. They confiscate all the film. You can't find the plane. How the heck did they land that low, at that speed to go into the building that way?
Holes. Yeah, there's so many holes in that story. It's our government's lying. I don't know who really is behind. Obviously, you're right, Scott. The military contractors got very, very rich, and we killed millions of people right after and conquered a lot of countries. So,
yeah, well, I will say,
if you follow the money,
yeah, I will say I talked to some people in Saudi Arabia who I trust, who seem to confirm the elements of the official story. But listen, they couldn't get the Capitol Police on January 6th over to protect the Capitol. The incompetence in the military and in any bureaucracy is enormous. I mean, I cover business, and business is abysmally run. You could ask from here to eternity, why don't companies do sensible things? Incompetence is the biggest thing. So I don't think that those arguments are final. All I can say is I think I have an insider's view, and it doesn't deviate greatly. I've also interviewed some military figures, But that's a whole other show to get into.
Yeah, we could do an entire show. Are there any conspiracies, quote, that you buy into? For example, where do you stand with Kennedy assassination? Do you buy the official narrative of the Kennedy assassination?
Yeah, I read a book called, I think, High Treason or something that was very, very well argued on the subject. And I realized that, the official story has a lot of problems with it. But in order to really take a firm, informed position, and I've read, others who gave arguments pro and con about the official version, but I realized this you can devote a lifetime to it. So I chose not to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, well, I don't buy the official narrative, obviously. What about you, Christian? What do you think of conspiracies? Are there any conspiracies that you definitely hold on to?
So,
do you think Paul McCartney is really alive, or is he dead? I'm just going to keep throwing them all night, just randomly throwing them at people.
So I'm not going to say too much about this, but Gnosticism is kind of a conspiratorial religion.
And they were accused of being conspiracy theorists by the church father. Paranoid conspiracy.
Right.
See, Scott,
right.
listen. Paranoia is part of being Gnostic. I'm sorry. Anyway,
they
sorry
have
for the
good reason to be paranoid. They're being hunted as heretics. But then the whole mythology is also conspiratorial. You've got the archons who are manipulating everything and so on. So because of that, I think Gnostics are vulnerable to conspiratorial thinking. So anybody who is a Gnostic, I think, needs to try to just really apply some self-analysis and critical thought, and just be careful about what you buy into, because these rabbit holes can be dangerous. You could get lost in them. And I think a lot of the conspiratorial thinking that goes on in Dr. Heller's church is not healthy. So now that doesn't mean that I don't, buy that I think like the government is truthful and, no, I mean,
what's this thing about the government? Never believe anything until it's been officially denied by the government. That's when you know it's time to start looking.
Right. So,
and you're right. I mean, we're talking about Scientology, Chris. Very intelligent, mystical, sensitive people are the prime victims of falling into a cult, whether it's the Manson family, you name it, because your mind is moving fast, you're seeing into other worlds, you've got chaos, and these cults offer you comfort and straight answers. And so you're right, so you have to be careful. Our minds can't be moving too fast, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's been an interesting aspect of this whole COVID and QAnon conspiracy amalgamation. It's interesting how it has spread so wildly through certain spiritual communities. The yoga community, the alternative spirituality community. So yeah, I think what you're saying is like right on target. And I've got lots of friends. I'm a registered yoga teacher, and I used to go to some esoteric school, kind of like a witchcraft and wizardry school almost, for healing arts. And like so many of them have just gone off the deep end with these conspiracy theories, and it's kind of frustrating. It's like, man, you're such an open, sensitive, spiritual person, and then you've been infected with some really wacky ideas, and I just don't know what I can do for you to help you out, but I still love you.
Yeah, so. I think there's a conspiracy theory that all nuclear bombs are fake. I haven't gone down there, but I want to, because for me, conspiracy is a form of therapy. I discover a lot about myself and my inner workings. I mean, I know the hot button one that keeps getting hot is the whole Tartaria mud floods one. That one's really gaining a lot of then it's fun. For me, it's conspiracy entertainment. And again, I have certain conspiracies that I'm like 9/11 or the Kennedys. Like, no, stop with, I don't know. What about you,
Wow.
Vince? Are you going to remove your mask and show us your lizard form, or what do you think?
I don't know. There's so many things. Well, I live in California, as do Scott and Chris. And, years ago we heard, this old joke saying, what's the difference between conspiracy and reality? Well, here in California, it's about a week, And, I remember Nancy Pelosi saying, we're going to get them out of their cars. And people said, no, she didn't really mean it. Well, look, now they're like taking away gas engines. And I mean, meat is just like, my wife just showed me $25 a pound now for a steak. The gas prices are going up, inflation. I mean, all right, here are my favorite top level conspiracies: capitalism, communism, and fascism. They're all conspiracies. And look at it, inflation is one of the biggest ones, right? You make your money and everything, and they're eating away at it. I mean, it's serious, and it never stops. It never stops. So, stock market, that's another conspiracy, right? People are, invest, tanks. Used to be, I tell this story a lot. When I was a kid, was 9 years old, we sat in the parking lot, Lodi, New Jersey. Hello out there in New Jersey, people. And at the Alexandria Hamilton Savings Bank, 5.25% interest on a regular savings account, painted on the side of the building. Wow. Painted. I mean, they paid it. And now look, 0.02, percent. I mean, what's up with that? It seems that we no longer have an economy that can pay you back for the money you loan to it. Because you know what? Guess what? All the banks, there's another conspiracy. Read about the Federal Reserve, a big one. And that's real. Right, Scott? You really deny the Federal Reserve is kind of a conspiracy, and the money system, and
the erosion of the middle class, the destruction of our health.
Money circulates 13 times. You deposit it, and it goes from bank to bank to bank, and they make money every time.
Yeah, and just because you've got a D in the White House doesn't mean the machine is going to stop or turn good or be nice. It's the destruction of the American people.
Well, I'm a business reporter, as you know, and I just interviewed the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank, which is very different from other banks. It funds 40% of the venture capital launches and stuff like that. So a lot of it is just, the in general, 95% of organizations, whether they're nonprofits or they're academic administrators, or they're the Pentagon, military. It's all, you can really lay a lot at the feet of incompetence and greed without imagining the Illuminati. But Sandra, you had something on that?
Well, I have a lot of friends that are really heavily into the conspiracy things. One woman swears there's no such thing as a man ever, no man ever touched the moon. I told her that we met Buzz Aldrin ourselves. Doesn't matter what I say. Doesn't matter anything. Doesn't matter at all. They're convinced that this is the way it is, and nothing you can do to break their belief system. The only thing they can do possibly is transcend the chatter with the light and sound machine and do a special kind of creative visualization that will create a new reality for them. But other than that, they are set in their belief systems.
Flat Earth is another example. That's a good one. Flat Earth. I say the Earth is a point. It's an infinite point.
Yeah. I don't. I've said on record. I've said I don't buy into flat Earth. That's one I don't.
So flat and it's hollow.
Yeah, that was popular in, I think, the 60s, right? So.
Yeah, the hollow Earth. That still comes back. I still see it on the internet here and there. On the Secret Sun.
Miguel, I want you to create a conspiracy theory therapy. Can you do that? Like a program for people.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy. It's you simply like I'm sure Heller would agree, it's the inner journey that matters. It's how you change your inner alchemy as you're studying these conspiracies and you're going down these rabbit holes. I mean, whether Kennedy, there's not much any of us can do if Kennedy was killed by the CIA right now, is there? But it is a great journey of discovery about myself, my relation to the country, to the world, to my belief systems when I grew up, and it's a realignment of things. So that's the way I see it. It's what am I going to find out at the end about myself? So. And yeah, don't get too absorbed in it, because again, how much change can you really make? What difference is it going to make? So
that's really interesting.
Anything, yeah, and of course it just supports my Gnostic views that you can't trust the archons, the powers and principalities. Power corrupts, absolutely. I mean, what did Jung say? The opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is power. Anybody who gets power is going to turn into an archon and try to oppress those below and try to get away with horrible things. It's the most addictive thing in the world, and there's a lot of bad addictive things out there, many of them FDA approved. So, and I'm not talking about the V word, I'm talking about Oxycontin, all that junk that they've thrown out into the public, which has done so much damage to the middle class and the lower class. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, addictive drugs, that's a conspiracy, period, right? Mm-hmm. Alcohol, everything that people can be addicted to or get attached to, that's a conspiracy because there's people making money.
$1 million marketing advertising budgets to make sure that we take this shit into our bodies.
And the people making the money are also the regulators who are supposed to watch the people making the money. So there's
it's like the meme where you've got one of the presidents of Monsanto, and you have a picture of Monsanto, and then the next year he's working for the Department of Agriculture, and you're like, what? We're crazy? We're the conspiracy theorists?
Exactly.
So it's something else, but it's a great conversation. Anything else, Scott, on this topic? I guess the Illuminati's not around anymore, as much people would say. I think it's fascinating that the Jesuits were disbanded by the Pope. Then the Illuminati showed up. And then when the Illuminati disappeared, the Jesuits came back. That's a historical fact. Obviously, it's a speculation, but it's an interesting one, I think. Well, obviously, people think that the Freemasons are still pulling the strings. Some think that the Freemasons are connected to the Knights Templar. What has your research led you to, Scott?
Well, like a lot of your listeners, I bought into the Holy Blood, Holy Grail accounting of how the Templars found a scroll in the temple. And then after their persecution, they escaped to Scotland and they built Roslin Church. It has all these mysterious symbols. And they took part in the battle at Bannockburn, which I know a lot about because I've written about it a number of times. And I also bought into this idea of a connection between the Freemasons and the Templars from the books of Robert Lomas and Christopher Knight, like Hiram P., Second Messiah, which was about Jacques de Molay. And everything seemed to make sense until I read Robert Lomas's more recent book, Templar Genesis of Freemasonry. And he meticulously picks apart his prior assertions. And he basically says, first of all the claims about the Templars being linked to Freemasonry and all this stuff are all based on unsupportable statements. Everybody says this person said, this witness, and so forth. So I don't think anybody can read the Templar Genesis of Freemasonry, which has a kind of misleading title, and come away confident in what has become a big part of the esoteric and Gnostic movement. But he does say that, or actually, one of our favorite authors, Gary Lackman, who I think is maybe the most objective of all the writers about esoteric movements, he has a book called The Secret Teachers of the Western World, and he explains how Freemasonry probably did emerge from the stonemasons guild, because the freestone that was softer, and the master masons would do the fine carving. They weren't just bricklayers and stuff building the cathedrals. And they had to move from town to town to do this kind of work. And very few people traveled then, and they would have signs to distinguish themselves as to whether they were masons or not. And then as they were working on this sacred architecture, it got kind of linked in their mythology to the temple. And basically it went from being actual but very devout, moral stonemasons, and from 1500 to 1700, especially with the big push from James I of England, it evolved from actual operative masonry into what's called speculative masonry, which used hermetic symbols, got away from the Catholic interpretation of things, and kind of fueled the Renaissance. And so there is a connection back to the medieval times, but not further than that. But I will say that regardless of that, if you read a book like my friend Mark Coltco Rivera wrote about, called The Mysteries of Freemasonry, there are a lot of benefits to studying the Masonic lore and the symbols and stuff like that, as long as you don't take it too seriously when it gets back to Hiram Abiff and the original temple and all that kind of stuff. So I came away realizing that this extremely popular notion that seemed to me very meticulously fact-checked in the books that I read, one of the inventors or popularizers of this, Robert Lomas, has pretty much disproven it, I think.
Yeah, Lomas was a past guest, and he did talk about that. Yeah, that's definitely been done. What was I going to say before? I don't know if there are any questions, Vance, but before we get into that, I wanted to make a little announcement, a little commercial, if you would. First, let me get my screen stuff here. Let's see if I can get this working.
Yeah, I don't see any questions so far. There's so much activity, I might have missed some. But so if there's any questions, people, go ahead and repeat them.
Yeah. But I'd like to talk about last week, my new little book came out, 10 Snackable Meditations to Get You Through Any Shitty Day. It is out on PDF on the site. It is drawn from many traditions, short, sweet exercises, wellness, meditative, mind trick exercises that can get you right back in things, especially in these days when everybody's so fragmented, everybody's so stressed, so busy. And it's a 10 plus a bonus. And again, I drew from many meditations, from Zen, even from Tibetan Buddhism to New Age. There's exercises from Gurdjieff, from the Sedona method from Arizona, from Christianity, from Islam. And I wanted to do something that would help people out. The feedback in just the last week that I've gotten has been very good. I know Scott was very kind to write a blurb. He really liked it. And I think it can help you out. I'll have a link on the show notes for you if you want to get 10 snackable meditations. It is out on PDF right now, but I'm working to get it very soon on audiobook. I did the voiceover myself, and it will be out on Amazon because people are requesting a paperback, something they can carry around when they need to whip it out and they're stressed out in traffic, or they're having a fight with the family. What did Ram Dass said? If you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. And or you're just having a bad day at work because some email or jerk off just pissed you off. One of those, you can just whip it out or put on the headphones and find one of those meditations that takes 5 minutes to learn and master, and will get you right to where you need to be and give you a little breathing room to get you back if you need to. If sometimes we don't have time to get to our yoga class or therapy session, we can't get to the gym until the end of the day or something like that. We can't wait till the end of the day and sit in our room and meditate. So this is something that I think it has helped me out. These sort of quick sanity hacks that'll get you right back. So it is out now. I will have a link in the show notes, and definitely get it as part. This is part of the Finding Hermes program, which attempts or has actually been successful in giving you alternative means to dealing with addiction, mental health, or other issues today, as we are finding out the old ways just ain't working anymore like they used to be. So we need more choices, we need more alternatives, and we need more just stuff that's tailored to each of us, because all of us are different. We all have different spiritual constitutions and makeup. So we just need more choices and stuff. So that's my little commercial for you. So let us get back to our regularly scheduled insanity here at the Halloween special. Yeah, bye from us. All five of us here. Yeah, you can trust us. We're sane. Vance, no questions from the audience so far?
Don't see any. Well, there was one way in the beginning, which is if you're born on Halloween, this particular person was, are you damned to hell? And then what's the significance of being born on Halloween? Does it give you powers? I'm adding this. They give you powers? Does it send you to the nether regions? What does it do?
Here's one that just came up. Here's a quick one. Let's read it together.
Ah.
What is a Gnostic perspective on gaining new information that shakes one belief paradigm, even if it is not true information? Who wants to take it? Scott, since you are our main guest.
Speaking from my background, having spent about 50 years following various esoteric movements and being a heretic from the beginning when I was born a Mormon and grew up in a family that was involved in alternative medicine, I think you have to learn to develop critical thinking. And that's not easy to do, but there are a lot of things that Sandra mentioned, for example, reading Bruce Lipton's, what's the name of the book? Biology of Belief. I like to recommend to people Harville Hendricks's Getting the Love You Want, and other things about the subconscious. Unless you go through serious psychotherapy or some of the techniques that you mentioned, Miguel, in your book, you're just going to be a prisoner of the subconscious and easily susceptible to brainwashing. So it starts, in my opinion, from reading an actual book. We've talked, for example, The Gnostic New Age by April DeConnick, Stefan Heller's book on Gnosticism. There are many good books out there. Well, there's mine also, God Reconsidered, that will help ground you in some facts. And I think it's very important to get on to the Inner Sanctum, Miguel's group on Facebook, because you need to confer with other people in a private area where you can ask questions and get answers, because as you guys have said, the whole world is corrupt. We are dominated by all the mainstream religions, which we've argued in prior interviews. All have clearly explanations for why we are here that make absolutely no sense. And so if you're going to not go from being brainwashed by your culture to getting involved with a heresy, you've got to be very careful, because especially in this age where any kind of rumor can spread like wildfire, people are very susceptible to superstition. That's one reason we started this Sacred Cows series here, is to say that not everything that is the alternative is better. You got to develop some intellectual rigor. And one of the things Chris and I have been trying to do with our spring history and philosophy discussions is to kind of sort through the different theories about what's true about Gnosticism. We had a really vigorous one with David Hyatt Beckel a few months ago. And so there's a lot to learn. I'm still a beginner, but read some good books, get informed, listen to the Aeon Byte interviews, participate in Inner Sanctum, and read Miguel's book, and that will keep you somewhat on the crooked and narrow, as it were.
Yeah, good advice. And listen, cultivate your inner voice, your own voice. There's a question I put up. I just wanted to get it quickly because I just flagged it. It's from Brendan Fowler. Which Gnostic text do you think is most approachable to suggest to Christian friends as an introduction to Gnosticism? Well, obviously, the most popular one that's always a bridge between Christians and Christian Gnostics is the Gospel of Thomas, because it is very approachable. A lot of these sayings are in the canonical Gospels, but it's got a very Gnostic or mystic bent to it. Jesus talks about how we are the light that came before the world, how the kingdom of God is spread around, and all we need to do is wake up to see that we are still in Eden. We have an inner light. So, unlike the canonical Jesus, the Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas is still Gnostic. He's giving you information to wake up. The other one I would say, and people don't want to hear it, but it's a fact, the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John was first used and by the Gnostics. The Gnostics wrote expositions on the Gospel of John. Orthodoxy sort of appropriated it too. But when you take off your Sunday school church glasses, you see that this Jesus who's talking about, I am one with the Father, I am not of this world, the world will hate you. He's talking, it's very Gnostic, but he's talking about you. You are Jesus. You are the beloved disciple. You are older than time and space. You're not of this world, and the light is within you. But those two I would definitely start with off the top of my head. You guys have any other suggestions that I'm missing?
On my website, godreconsidered.com, I have the chapter from the book on what's wrong with mainstream Christianity. And I draw on Bart Ehrman and other scholars to show that mainstream Christianity is not based on the New Testament. That was a 4th century invention by Constantine and the bishops of the time after they got rid of the Gnostics. It's absolutely astounding. If Jesus were to come here today and look at today's Christianity, especially the evangelical version, the Catholics too, there's absolutely no relationship between the issues they're concerned about and what the New Testament is about. But it really took, for me, Bart Ehrman, who's a former evangelical scholar, to open my eyes just to the total contradictions between the 4 Gospels. So the chapter's up there, and anybody will probably find it will shock most Christians, but it'll separate the wolves from the sheep as far as those who are really serious about listening to the alternative to the official version.
Any other suggestions?
I was going to suggest both the Gospel of John and the Gospel of Thomas, but honestly, I don't know that I would introduce anybody to Gnosticism through primary sources. It might be better to give them an introductory text like Dr. Heller's Introduction to Gnosticism, maybe one of your books, Miguel.
Philip K. Dick novel, go watch The Matrix.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's an even better idea.
Oh, wait, go look at our society. Oh, yeah, just look at the real world. It's Gnostic.
Right.
All right, well, great suggestions, and thank you, everyone. Vance, any comments or questions from yourself or the audience?
Yeah, we got some questions. I will bring from there. Lori Johnson wants to know, what do we think about the possibility that we're somehow in an alternate universe? She says it, and the way I interpret that is, different universes, different dimensions, the simulation. If we're in a simulated universe, so
Yes,
what's
it's
the
a
nature
fact.
of the universe? Yeah, how are we
Yes.
partitioned? What kind of levels are there? The 7 heavens. What
Yes. No matter what you say.
Right. Yes.
So hold on to that. Don't let go before the archons make you think that this is the only reality it is and everything makes sense.
Yeah,
Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I would add to that people have kind of, the New Age movement's kind of gone off the deep end, imagining that there is no reality here. Actually, the Scientologists say this is just a kind of an imagined agreement by the Thetans. In my second blog, on my Facebook page for God Reconsidered, I go into some detail about the fact that there is actually a fair amount of evidence that we're living in a real reality. This is not just the New Age thing about, oh, we're inventing our reality. There's no reality except what you're imagining. You can tell that to the person whose son is killed by a gang bullet from 2 miles away, or is walking across the street and a drunk driver kills them and so forth. This is a real reality. Now, there are a lot of other dimensions. The irony of the skeptics is that they are willing to imagine something for which there isn't actually any good evidence, and that is the multiverse of many, many dimensions, in which everything that could possibly happen is happening and is real. And yet they won't accept the idea of supernatural or paranormal dimensions. I think they're up to 13 dimensions in the multiverse or something like that, which just goes to show you that scientism, which is the closed-minded materialistic version that's about 50 years behind the evidence, is just another religion. And they just dress it up in very respectable language. But yeah, there is a tremendous amount of evidence for other dimensions. Scott Rogo, Dean Radin have written books on the science behind this, but you can't get the respectable folks to actually look at it.
I thought of a simple example. If you think of a light wave, right? A wave has it comes and it goes to zero and it goes, and it goes to zero and it comes, it goes, right? That's a wave. Well, when it goes to zero, where is it? What reality? In what reality does this wave exist? And basically, it's like something that's appearing and disappearing. Well, if it disappears and if it's still real, then you could imagine, and this is what science does in a lot of cases, it goes into another dimension. It kind of rotates in and out of this dimension. That's why it has a sinusoidal curve. So that's a very simple example of multiple dimensions.
There's nothing incompatible about this world being a simulacrum and being real. It sounds like a contradiction, but something can be both illusory in many ways as well as real. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we can prove that everything we see is in a way an illusion, not that it's not real, like you say, because everything we see is colored by our senses and our mind's integration of those senses. We can't see radio waves. We can't see radioactive things. We can't see, because our eyes only focus in certain places. I mean, my dog can smell things outside the house and hear things that I can't hear. So my dog's living in another reality, in a sense, in terms of what his senses present to him. So we all live in a filtered version of what's out there.
Exactly.
And nobody can prove that there's anything out there anyway. That's not provable. It's a hypothesis.
And that's also why I have no problem with the way the Scientologists formulate their idea of reality as sort of a matrix of relations in which you have some sort of a common agreement about what reality is. I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, it's still reality. It's just it's just a theory about how is it formed. So anyway,
well, and it's a matter of definitions, right? Philosophy will teach you that the definitions are very, very important. So, what's the definition of real?
Mm-hmm.
Definition of real, and in a lot of cases, I think they're assuming that real is persistent, indefinitely, infinitely persistent. Like the laws of the universe, are they real? Well, most of the time. As far as we know, electrons and atoms and so forth and gravity, all that has been working the same way.
Most people mistake reality for some kind of abstract concept. they abstract from reality these ideas, these theories. They don't realize what they're doing. They reify them, and they think that that's reality. So,
Yeah.
Heavy.
I'd like to suggest a topic before we run out of time, because it's left over from our last sacred cows, and that's alchemy, because it's very popular in the esoteric movement. And Chris and I, and especially Sandra, have some strong opinions about it.
Well,
Ooh, let's hear it.
Okay, go ahead,
okay.
Sandra.
I knew Art Kunkin very well. He became editor of the LA Free
And Sandra,
Press.
could you just speak up a bit?
Yes,
I'm
I
having
knew
trouble
Art
here.
Kunkin, editor of the Free Press in LA in the 70s. And he became a very serious esoteric seeker. And in 1979, he did a 7-year apprenticeship in alchemy for the Research Society. He became their editor. And he told me personally he thought that turning metal into gold was real, serious student, and he inherited the entire library of Israel Regati, got his whole library.
Whoa.
Yeah, and
Golden Dawn.
Israel Regati, of course, was Crawley's secretary and one of the last members of the Golden Dawn. Well, he taught, he became president, Art did, of the philosophical research, and taught lab alchemy, and was awarded a lifetime membership in the International Academy of Alchemy. And in 2009, he produced 5 volumes, of which one he never published anything because he died in 2019. And the last time I saw Art was with Peter Herkos, Amri Paharish, who brought Uri Geller and Peter to this country. And we were watching Uri perform on stage. He grew little sprouts in his hand with the cameras. And that was the last time I saw Art. But that was a long time ago, and Peter has since passed. But Art Kunkin really became a power to be reckoned with. Started out as a kind of a hippie guy, and became a serious student of alchemy, thoroughly believed in it. Fabulous, fabulous story.
Now, ironically enough, I got to know Art Kunkin when I was in high school. I was publishing my first, believe it or not, if you can remember, Ditto, before Mimeograph. It was a Tolkien fan magazine written in Elvish. And Kunkin was the 60s is really where he became famous as the editor of the Free Press. And he was a real Tolkien freak. So a friend of mine, we were going to be roommates at BYU University, unlikely enough, went down to Art Kunkin and the Free Press, spent a couple of hours with him. Now, this is long before he got interested in the esoteric. The thing about alchemy that has been kind of mysterious for me, if you listen to Heller's lectures about alchemy as a metaphor for personal transformation, to me it was never clear what you're actually supposed to do. Are you supposed to like get a brick of lead and what do you do to turn it into gold, and can you retire with it? So if you want to hear Heller's take on kind of the symbolic interpretation and not what Art was doing, which was the real traditional alchemy, the lectures on this are recorded at BC, as in Brian, Chris, bcrecordings.net. But I listened to him several times. It wasn't clear to me until, again, Gary Lackman intervened with Jung the Mystic, and he straightened out a lot of what Jung was trying to talk about. Jung was not a very good, and was a very confusing communicator. And what he meant was that he found that if he put people into kind of a mesmeric trance and got them to use their active imagination, which is somewhere between visualization and daydreaming, that they would be in a dialogue with their unconscious. And that was a step on the road to individuation. And as Lackman says, this union of the opposites, which is the goal of Jungian individuation, is kind of compatible with alchemy. Now, Heller mentioned that, well, maybe the alchemists were projecting their unconscious mind into the material, or maybe the fumes from the transmutation changed their consciousness. But here's the interesting paradox. There are a lot of actual alchemists who have pushed back on this and have said he's taken the psychological part too far. And one of them, who was not a practicing alchemist himself but knew some, was Israel Regardie. And he was a friend of Stephan Heller. And so he was sympathetic to Jung, and he supported Jung's interpretation. But as Lackman said, it's not likely that all these guys who were trying to turn lead into gold for the king, were involved in higher conscious activities. Now, there were some famous alchemists in more or less modern times. Goethe, the author August Strindberg, and some others who actually seem to have been involved in this transmutation of base materials. But also, I think part of it was a cover, pretending that that's what they were doing so that they could be involved in Hermetic studies, which, the church wasn't too happy about. So my take on alchemy, and I think Chris has another point on this, is that it's unfortunately it's a little bit like ritual magic, as Sandra's explained before, trying to master kung fu, being a master of Kabbalah and stuff. The problem is most people, 99.9% of people, are not going to be able to master whatever the techniques are to get to that state of enlightenment. I don't think by whatever process, alchemy is the best way to connect with the gods or achieve enlightenment or anything else. If you're really going to get involved with lead, or you're going to go through long-term active imagination, not many people are going to get to the end of that road. And I think there are a lot of other things where you should start. For example, Miguel, your book has 10 summaries of pretty basic meditation and other exercises that it's mostly a matter of habit. Sandra and I took meditation classes, and I've been doing transcendental meditation from the mid-70s, and I've found that, and just doing general visualization and some of the other things Sandra and I do, they really supercharge synchronicities, which are those little mini miracles. And we just had a couple of mind-blowing ones this week. So I wouldn't pursue alchemy. Maybe Chris has another point of view on this, but it seems to have been, in one form or another, a way to at least symbolize the transformation into higher consciousness. Oh, Sarah Cunningham? What about it?
It's Regardie.
No, I wouldn't go into that. Chris, what's your take on this? Because you've studied it a little bit.
So I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. I think, for some people, alchemy is their holy cow that provides them the alchemical milk of transformation. But getting the milk out of that cow is a bit of a challenge, I think. It's like Scott said, it's not like there's this simple manual like you've produced with a bunch of standard alchemical practices. It's almost like you got to just go do a bunch of research and kind of draw upon the principles to invent your own rituals and so forth. Now that's based on my limited exposure to this, so there may be people here who know better than I do and disagree, and I respect that. But say, for example, I read one ritual about how you sit with a glass of water in front of you. You pour your negative thoughts into the water. You then see the water being purified, and then you drink it. So that sounds like an interesting ritual. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Tonglen, which is arguably an alchemical practice. It's all about transformation. That's what alchemy is all about, just, transformation. But why would I? So for somebody who wants to do their own thing, great. If you want to sit by yourself and practice that exercise or whatever exercise turns you on, okay, great. I would rather tap into an existing tradition in which there are people who have practiced a technique like Tonglen for thousands of years, draw upon their experience and wisdom and the whole culture and theology behind it and so forth. So that's just me. For some people, alchemy is their thing, and more power to them. But it seems to me that Scott was right, that it seems like you got to invest a lot of energy to get some kind of a return. It's almost like Heller joking. Supposedly there were reports that some of the alchemists did succeed in producing gold, but the expense of producing the gold actually exceeded the amount of the gold that they produced. So it might be a similar kind of thing here in terms of our spiritual return on investment. We'll add one more thing. So my take in general on alchemy is that it started as not a spiritual practice, just, it was just about mythology in Egypt. And I know it also took place in other parts of the world, but focusing for the Western tradition on Egypt, it was naturally associated with ideas about transformation. I think the stuff that Heller came up with about, there's inhaling fumes and getting high, that's kind of a fun idea, but it's kind of, I don't think it carries water. Instead, I think what happened was these folks who were working with gold, naturally wanted to figure out, well, we do all of these transformations with our metalwork. Is there some way that we can produce gold? Then they started looking into the philosophical ideas. So alchemy became involved with Greek philosophy, borrowed the theories of Greek philosophy to try to achieve the material goals of alchemy. And thus we have these philosophical, and then from there, the spiritual ideas imported into alchemy. But look, if you want to learn Greek philosophy, study Greek philosophy, study alchemy. Actually, if you want to study a philosophy of that explains change, don't go back to Aristotelianism and prima materia. That stuff, that has been passed by more sophisticated philosophies. So I would say process philosophy is a much more alchemically up-to-date philosophy than Neoplatonism or Aristotelianism. Process philosophy explains change, explains transformation in a much more sophisticated way, and I think it does it in a way that is perfectly consonant with all of the alchemical principles. So there's my spiel.
All right. Yeah. Well, you guys definitely attack some sacred cows. I probably wouldn't agree with a lot of it, but I agree with a lot of it. So 6 of what was this? Half a dozen, 12 or something, whatever.
6 of one, half a dozen or the other.
Yeah. There's no point. I know it was alchemy that took down the Twin Towers and not Arabs. So you're just gonna have to live with that. I like this question. I put it up. Question for the panel: how does it feel knowing that all of you are going to hell? I said, well, that's not a problem, because according to Gnosticism, we already are in hell. We are at the highest point of hell. The highest point where hell is actually like, one of those country club prisons that you give, CEOs and government people. That's what we are. So, but anyway, if anybody else disagrees, and tell me what's going to happen when you go to hell.
Well, one thing I'd like to point out, I've read about 10 very thorough accounts of near-death experiences from all cultures, and none of them report a hell, a temporary purgatory, if you will, sometimes, but it's pretty remarkably positive. In every culture throughout history where we can collect records and in all the surveys of people who have had near-death experiences and stuff like that. Now, the Mormons don't believe there is a hell. There are lower levels of heaven, and people end up with their own kind, which kind of seems like when they are greeted on the other side by friends and family, it's culturally influenced. They kind of go into an area that, well, Heller and I discussed this, and we think that what it is people enter into a dimension that is congruent with their consciousness, and that their consciousness can evolve on the other side. It doesn't stop. That's another Mormon idea, that you're not necessarily stuck with what happens to you. The problem with all these traditional ideas about hell is, how about the 25% of the 108 billion people who have ever been born who died as children? What was their purpose? But this goes back in the Christian chapter on GodReconsidered.com. This whole concept of what qualifies you to get to heaven only applies to a relative handful of people, because the mortality rate was so high up until the 20th century. I mean, even the 500 million or so who died of smallpox in the 20th century, the whole concept of Christianity, that people are going to be judged, they're going to get to go to heaven because they happen to grow up in a quote unquote Christian family. It's so misguided, but mainstream Christianity couldn't be farther from what the New Testament message is.
Talk about a conspiracy. Hell definitely serves, right, to control people. You're going to hell if, and then you figure, what do I want this guy to do, or not to do?
All right. Well, anybody else want to talk about hell? I got the chat room kind of going.
I'd like to recommend that last time we talked about Rajneesh being a cult that Sandra belonged to. She also belonged to another kind of cult, the Gurdjieff group, and maybe she could stimulate some interest there, because I know Gurdjieff is not very well understood today by the esoteric movement.
He's a grouch.
Plus, there's a lot of satellite splinter groups. It's not centralized, each group. Right. Some do turn into cults, and some are just sort of like AA. People meet on weekends and try to practice Gurdjieffian techniques. So it's varied. Yeah, go ahead, Sandra. Tell us about your experience.
Gurdjieff was much more than any kind of leader of that sort. Ouspensky, I read A Search for the Miraculous, a fabulous entry into Gurdjieff's idea that us as human beings are hypnotically sound asleep. And he called his method the Fourth Way, or the work. And he attracted tremendous following of the most fabulous people in the world. I was with him for many, many years. Very, very difficult to work with because he's no longer here, of course. But it was a very serious study, and he had disciples you could not believe. Everybody in the world, who was anybody at that time, was interested in his work. Gurdjieff himself was a mysterious person who absolutely had the most fabulous books. What Life Is Only Real While You're Here, Needs with Remarkable Men, fabulous writer, fabulous work, fabulous shocker. I stood with him for many, many years till it became too difficult to stay. And it was very, very difficult because he was the study itself was a very demanding work. But Gurdjieff was much more than Rajneesh. Gurdjieff was the original. He was really the original.
Yeah, I'd also like to say that Sandra's read all of the books by Ouspensky and Gurdjieff, and I haven't. But when I was thinking about this, I noticed some congruities with Gnosticism. First of all, he thought that the earth was a very bad place. If you listen to all these Christians and stuff who say, on the seventh day, the Lord rested because he had created something that was very good. We've talked about whether that actually matches historic reality. Secondly, he said that we've forgotten our real selves. That sounds very Gnostic. We should stop being mechanical, kind of as we're programmed by society. And the goal is to move up the chain of being to the absolute, which sounds like the transcendent God. So I was kind of surprised to learn that, he was certainly one of the earliest popularizers of a Gnostic-like philosophy that was pretty rigorous. And I think he's underappreciated today. He's kind of been overshadowed by all the other cults and movements and philosophies and stuff like that. Yeah, he had a very interesting, wild life.
He did indeed. Yeah, we've done several shows on Gurdjieff, and we will probably do some more in the end of the year, early next year. Vance, any other questions from the audience or your comments from yourself or anything?
Well, we got from a little ways back, somebody wanted to talk about the archon, the nature of the archons. And we have one about William Shatner. Which one you want? I'll read
well, the archons, we could take all of us could do an hour on the archons.
Yeah, it's a big subject.
For Shatner, my God, yeah.
Well, he saw death in space. That's what Liban Jibon wants to know what we thought of Shatner's comment about the dark bit that reminded him of death out in space. He looked at the Earth or whatever, he looked at space, and it reminded him of his own mortality, because he's 90 and he's facing his own death, and somehow space reminded him of death. It's kind of like the Abraxas thing, So
the tomb, maybe just being out there and you see everything at once, both life and death.
I mean, he faced death so many times on the Enterprise. I don't see what the problem is now. But
but he was never with anybody as evil as Jeff Bezos.
No. Sandra, you're saying something? Go ahead, Sandra.
He said that he was crying because he realized that Earth was so fragile, and that it was such a fragile planet. He felt sorry. He felt delighted. Much more important than being weightless in space. It was a very inspiring message, I thought.
Yeah, he said that too. That's a different quote from what Liban was saying. I saw that too.
And somebody's asking. I gotta ask Sandra, because that gives me a chance to say it. But what do you think of Rudolf Steiner? Steiner. Had to be done.
I don't really comment about it.
You never studied Steiner?
I don't comment about it.
Okay. Scott?
I don't know much about him. I know that Heller found him quite interesting. He was kind of a transition figure, I think, with connections to the Theosophical movement. But I think in Gary Lachman's Secret Teachings of the Western World, he has some information about him. He struck me, from what little I know about him, as a real truth seeker. He didn't just fall in with what was popular being taught, in the 19th century about what the truth was and what you had to do and things like that. I mean, he struck me as somebody who really struck an independent path to try to get to the truth, but his movement never really took off much. I mean, it's still around today. There's still fans, but it never became the force that the Theosophical Society did.
Yeah, you still have Waldorf schools, and he's still
right.
Definitely influential.
Schools, that's probably his greatest legacy. Speaking of archons and Shatner, Miguel and I have loosely discussed possibly delving into the topic of alien abductions and my theory about the archons. So maybe next Halloween. So if there's anybody out there who either has been abducted and would like to share, or who believes that the aliens, quote unquote, who are piloting the UFOs are extraterrestrials, which I don't, contact me through the GodReconsidered.com website, and maybe we'll incorporate some of your stuff into the show, because with the recent explosion in information about the Pentagon studying UFOs and stuff like that, this has gone from being a forgotten subject to being really on. I mean, when I saw the 60-minute show a couple of months ago, and I knew Harry Reid quite well, and of course that's right next door to, we were just up there near Area 51. There is, incidentally, in Las Vegas, a multimedia virtual reality center called Area 15, right outside Area 51 and outside Las Vegas. But anyway, so we may be able to address Shatner more seriously. I will say this, that the more evidence about life on other planets, really, I've said all along, there is no life on other planets. And in my book, I make the argument that the odds of evolution occurring on other planets is quite remote. There's a lot of naivete. Oh, there's an infinite number of planets. No, there's probably about 88 billion or something like that by the best estimate. But the problem is the 600 million years of evolution of multicellular organisms involve too many weird things happening to get to where we are now. So I'm a skeptic that they're aliens from other planets.
But we have those other dimensions. You have to count those.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Right. I do believe they're from other dimensions. Yes.
All right. So there's hope.
Yeah,
you know
there's hope.
I always come down with the UFOs to one thing. Who's going to tell us something helpful and new? You know, like all these aliens are, oh, you got to save the Earth. You guys are screwing it up and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I've heard it. You know, I don't need a flying saucer to tell me this. Tell me something interesting. You know, I'm always listening for something interesting, something like, yeah, I never thought about that. But somehow most of the aliens, you know, in the popular media at least, don't have much to say except the standard tropes, you know.
Well, remember Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, who incidentally was a big fan of Uri Geller. We were on Coast to Coast recently, and Uri Geller called in, and we kind of reestablished our relationship with him. We'd interviewed him long ago. We're working on an article for Fate magazine about him right now. But
don't forget, Arthur C. Clarke was also a pedophile.
Well, that doesn't make him wrong about one thing. If you remember the ending,
the anal probes part,
to Childhood's End, it would kind of explain why maybe the aliens don't want to reveal themselves. And for those who haven't read the book, I'm going to leave that a mystery. But you know, this is another thing about the so-called aliens. All these New Age people who say, "Oh, they're abducting us for good reasons," you know. And I've argued in a blog on my God Reconsidered Facebook page that the paranoia and the naivete about the abductions is really extraordinary. I mean, what the so-called aliens tell people is their scientific reasons for why they are trying to create hybrids so they can, inhabit and control and improve the earth and stuff like that. None of it makes any scientific or any common sense at all. And the paranoid groups out there, in my blog, I think it's number 6 on alien abductions, when you look at what the aliens are telling people, it's definitely not benevolent, and it doesn't even make sense to take it seriously. Part of my argument is that the archons and the aeons are fairly weak in this dimension. We have this notion that the gods, if you want to call them that, are these all-powerful beings, and they manifest themselves as the Virgin Mary or Krishna or some other entity. The reality is the intervention is like UFOs. It's very haphazard. It's according to the UFO aliens' so-called own testimony, it's very hard for them to exist in this reality. Apparently, that applies to all these supernatural beings. They don't intervene all the time, and that's congruent with Gnosticism, which says that there is kind of a balance of power between the evil and the good. So The longer I'm in Gnosticism, the more the science, the eyewitnesses, the supernatural encounters really support the Gnostic view of the universe. And, the absolute God is not involved in day-to-day management, and at least ever since the Garden of Eden.
Awesome. Well, I think we're getting towards the end. We're getting to over an hour and 40 minutes, a very rich, lively, and vibrant conversation. Vance, any last questions that you think that we should address, or should we wait till our next time?
Well, I don't know. Anybody want to talk about egregores and tulpas?
Yeah, that's another
big subject.
That's a big subject. Yeah,
that's from Joyce. Whoever. Are you serious?
Yeah, Joyce.
She wanted to know about the Theosophical Society too, but I said, "Wow, that's like a whole." That's the whole show.
But Joyce, you should get Mark Stavish's book, Egregores. It's a great book, and it's a short book. It's like less than 150 pages, and he really explains the idea of tulpas, egregores, thought forms, all that. Or we had him on AM Byte a couple years ago. We can get you the link if you reach out to Vance or I. But yeah, definitely go to Mark Stavish. Yeah, Theosophical Society, that could be in a whole nother.
Right.
Yeah. I think we dealt with last year. All right. Well, then why don't we just wrap up this very successful Halloween special? I think we got enough sacred cows. We might have to wait till the next one for some other topics. I think I had the question about taking Breaking Bad to a task, but that'll just have to wait. It's just a TV show, so who cares? More important, somebody kept mentioning Dune. I don't know. God, it's like I don't want to watch Dune on a tablet or even a TV. It's almost like I want to go to a movie theater or not watch it at all. What about you, Vance? Are you going to watch Dune?
I don't know. I saw a trailer last night on HBO. It's going to come on HBO, so I couldn't see it there,
Today.
But I didn't like the look of it. It looked grungy. I didn't like the actors. And I'm kind of a fan of the original one, even though everybody talks it down. But I'm a David Lynch fan. So.
David Lynch, yeah.
So it's going to be hard.
Underrated.
Yep.
I will say one last thing on movies, and that is we just went to and wrote an article about the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, and it just opened. It is, for any movie buff, it's worth coming to LA to see it. It is an extraordinary flashback to all the great movies. I mean, if you just sit there in the lobby for like half an hour, it's like, holy smoke, I meant to watch that. And it's an absolute treasure trove of artifacts, including the ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz, and kind of the background to what goes into creating movies. And I think it's just in time to save some of the theaters. There are actually a fair number of theaters open here in Los Angeles, another reason to come here. And we also have IMAX 3D here, and we have a whole bunch of virtual reality and immersion experiences. So come to LA and you can have a sober psychedelic experience.
For sure. All right. Christian, you watching Dune? Do you care?
Am I watching it? I'm a fan of it. And I like David Lynch. It's a pretty interesting film. But the books are definitely, masterworks.
Books are awesome. Oh my God,
yeah.
The books are great.
What about the new one though? You going to see that? Does that look good to you?
I don't know. I haven't. This is my first exposure to the fact that there's a new one coming out. So I'm going to have to see it.
You really are in Guantanamo Bay. You're just pretending the whole time. You really are cut off from society.
He's a Kwisatz Haderach.
We'll come and rescue you. Don't worry. We'll get on a boat we'll do the second Bay of Pigs and get you out, Christian.
Well, Chris always said he wanted to apply Gnostic clergy practices to prison. So isn't that the perfect place to rehabilitate the Muslim terrorists?
Yeah.
He's doing God's work.
Yep. Those anal probes aren't aliens, though, Chris. So I'm just going to warn you about that. Anyway, it's getting late, and really appreciate everybody coming on to the chat room. Great questions. Through the corner of my eye, I see some great conversations. I see some very strange comments too. I'm sure Van sees it. But what are you going to do? This is the multiplicity of people on the internet. But great show. And again, we'll have another scary Halloween special light coming out next week. And yeah, keep coming back, everybody. So first of all, Scott and Sandra, thanks again for coming on for one more blasphemy.
Yes, thank you.
And Christian, good to have you back. And I
Always good to see you.
hope everything evolves as it should. Only your ego gets in the way, or my ego gets in the way. Our souls know what's going on. Awesome. And Vance, as always, thanks for keeping us company and taking care of business.
Great to be here. Great to be with all the fans on the live chat and with Scott and Sandra and Christian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed hanging out with you guys for the evening.
Cool. It was a blast. All right, everybody. As I always say, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. You are amazing, and you can do so many wonders, and you are bigger than even this universe, and the universe is housed within you. As above, so below, said Hermes Trismegistos, speaking through Apollonius of Tyane. And thank you. Good night. And hello and goodbye. Take care, everyone.